Actor Danny Glover is revealing today he's living with Alzheimer's disease.
The longtime star, who turns 80 this month, says that he was diagnosed in 2023.
For decades, Danny Glover wasn't just an actor audiences admired. He became a familiar face whose performances defined an era of Hollywood. That's why recent headlines have left so many fans deeply concerned. When someone who has spent a lifetime inspiring millions begins facing serious personal challenges, the story becomes about far more than fame. It becomes a reminder that even our greatest heroes cannot outrun time. And now, what he confessed about his own mind will break something inside you. The words that broke a million hearts. On the 1st of July in the year 2026, Danny Glover shared news that shocked millions of people around the world. The 79-year-old actor, whose career inspired generations of movie fans, revealed that he had been living with Alzheimer's disease. Rather than allowing rumors to spread or letting someone else tell his story, Danny decided to speak openly himself. He first shared his diagnosis in an interview with People magazine before appearing later that morning on The Today Show with Lester Holt. For many fans, it was difficult to watch a man known for his strength and confidence speak so honestly about one of the greatest challenges of his life. From the very beginning, it was clear this was not an easy conversation. Danny did not try to hide his emotions or pretend everything was fine. Instead, he spoke with remarkable honesty about what he has been experiencing. He admitted that he was still struggling to fully accept the diagnosis and that there were days when it all felt impossible to understand. He explained that his mind often feels caught between moments where his memory seems perfectly normal and other moments that remind him life is changing. Some memories remain vivid, while others become harder to reach. It was a deeply personal confession that gave people a rare glimpse into what living with Alzheimer's can truly feel like. During his interview with Lester Holt, Danny remained calm and thoughtful. At one point, he said that he could live with the disease in a sense, but he also acknowledged the difficult truth that Alzheimer's continues to progress over time. He explained that as the disease advances, his life will inevitably change in ways he cannot fully predict. That simple statement carried enormous emotional weight because it reflected someone facing an uncertain future with honesty instead of denial. There was sadness in his words, but there was also quiet courage. What touched so many people was not just the diagnosis itself, but Danny's willingness to be vulnerable. In an industry where celebrities often try to appear strong at all times, he chose openness instead. His message became larger than his own story. It reminded families around the world that Alzheimer's affects real people who continue to deserve respect, dignity, and understanding. And the strangest part of that entire morning, the part nobody in Hollywood is talking about openly, is what Danny actually confessed. The 3 years nobody was told about. This is what really shook people when the news finally broke into the open. Danny was not diagnosed last month. He was not even diagnosed last year. He received the news back in 2023, which means for a full 3 years, he sat with this diagnosis in complete silence while the rest of us watched him show up at red carpets, sign autographs, and record voice work as if nothing at all was wrong. His family knew. His inner circle knew. And they all quietly agreed to protect him during those years while he tried to understand what was happening inside his own mind. You have to think about what that kind of silence does to a human being. Every time he stepped in front of a camera during those years, every time he laughed at a joke or gave a speech, he was carrying a secret that most people would have shared right away just to feel less alone. But Danny is not most people. Those closest to him say he wanted to fully understand the disease before he tried to talk about it in public. He wanted to know exactly what he was fighting before he asked strangers to stand and fight it with him. The timing of this reveal also carries a meaning that has been overlooked by almost everyone. Danny is turning 80 in just a few weeks, and those who know him well say that he did not want to enter his 9th decade of life carrying a lie by omission. He also wanted to align himself with the millions of families who are quietly living through this exact same nightmare in living rooms all across the world. He said in the People interview that acknowledging the diagnosis was in some sense acknowledging that it was happening to him, and at the same time that there are millions of others suffering from it. That single sentence tells you everything about who Danny Glover really is. Even in the middle of his own personal storm, he was still thinking about the people watching. He was still thinking about the strangers who would hear his name and finally feel seen for the first time. And that generosity of spirit, that need to turn his own pain into someone else's comfort, has been the story of his entire life. There is a reason he made that choice, and it goes back much deeper than most people realize. The small signs that nobody saw coming. Now comes the part where things get emotional, because when you go back and rewatch some of Danny's public moments from the last few years, the signs were quietly sitting there in plain sight. Fans on social media have already started digging up old interviews and event appearances, pointing out little pauses in his sentences, moments where he seemed to lose his train of thought, or times when his answers felt slower and more careful than they used to be. Most people just chalked all of it up to age. Nobody wanted to think anything worse than that. But this is the cruel truth about Alzheimer's disease. It does not announce itself with a scream or a warning bell. It creeps in quietly through the back door of your mind. It starts with small, forgotten names, misplaced keys, and repeated stories. It builds slowly over months and years, until the person you love is standing right there in front of you, but somehow feels miles away. And for a man who spent decades memorizing scripts, delivering long monologues, and giving speeches straight from the heart, those first small symptoms must have felt like tiny betrayals from the one part of himself he trusted the most. Danny has not gone into deep detail about which symptoms he first noticed, but medical experts who study this disease say the earliest warning signs almost always include difficulty finding the right word during a conversation, trouble remembering recent events, and small changes in personality or mood. When you look back at his measured pace of speech in recent interviews, and the way he sometimes took a beat before answering a question, it all starts to make painful sense. What makes his story even more layered is his health history. Danny lived with epilepsy from childhood into his mid-30s, dealing with seizures that shaped how he moved through the world for decades of his early life. He also faced a prostate cancer scare years ago that he handled quietly and privately without ever asking the world to pray for him. So this diagnosis is not the first time his body has forced him to fight for control of it. But this fight is unlike any of the others, because this time the battlefield is inside the very place where his memories, his craft, and his sense of who he really is all live together. A storyteller losing his own story. There is something almost unbearably cruel about the shape of Danny's diagnosis when you really think about it. This is a man whose entire career was built on memory itself. Every line he ever delivered as Roger Murtaugh in the Lethal Weapon films had to be pulled cleanly out of his mind under pressure, under bright lights, and under the heat of a moving camera. Every scene he shared with Whoopi Goldberg in The Color Purple. Every quiet monologue he gave in Beloved. Every dramatic beat in the movies audiences watched in packed theaters. All of it depended on a memory that could be trusted to show up when called. Actors do not just memorize words for a living. They memorize emotions, faces, and entire histories of characters who never really existed. They build whole worlds inside their heads and walk through those worlds while the cameras are rolling. Now try to imagine being the kind of actor who did that for over 40 years, and slowly realizing that the one tool you built your whole life around is starting to slip away from you. That is not just a health crisis. That is an identity crisis of a kind that most of us will never truly understand. Danny is also known for his voice, that deep, gravelly instrument that turned him into one of the most sought-after voice actors in animation and documentary work. From family films to serious historical projects, that voice carried authority, warmth, and something that felt almost like a hug traveling through the speakers of your living room. And now the mind behind that voice is being slowly rewritten by a disease that has no cure. That is the part of his story people are struggling to talk about, because it feels almost too painful to say out loud. Yet, here he is, still choosing to speak, still choosing to sit in front of Lester Holt and be honest with the country, still choosing to give People magazine the raw and unfiltered truth about what his days now look like. He is turning his fading memory into a spotlight for millions of others whose stories never get told to the world. The silent crisis nobody talks about. Then comes the angle that nobody in the news is discussing loud enough, and it may be the most important part of this entire story. Black Americans are twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's disease as their white counterparts. That number should stop the world for a full moment. Yet most people have no idea it is even a statistic, because the conversation around this disease has almost always centered on other communities and other faces. Danny stepping into the light might be about to change all of that in a single season. The reasons for this deep disparity are complicated, and honestly, they are painful to face. There are historical health inequalities that go back many generations. There is unequal access to early screening, to specialists, and to the newest treatments coming out of research labs. There are also environmental factors, chronic stress from racism, higher rates of hypertension and diabetes, all of which quietly raise the risk of cognitive decline over time. And on top of everything else, Black families often face long delays in diagnosis because their symptoms are dismissed or misread by doctors who were never trained to see them clearly. Danny Glover was not just any Black actor to come through Hollywood. He was one of the very first Black leading men to headline a major action franchise with a white co-star back when the industry was still telling itself that audiences would not accept it. He carried the weight of representation on his back for decades without ever making it about him. And now, whether he planned this or not, he is doing the same thing all over again. He is putting a familiar and beloved face on a disease that has been quietly devastating Black families in silence for years. Advocacy groups have already started using his announcement to push for better research funding, wider outreach in underserved communities, and better cultural training for doctors across the country. His name is once again being tied to a cause bigger than himself, which, if you know anything about how Danny has lived his life, is completely on brand for him. But the people who have loved him longest are not thinking about numbers right now. They are thinking about him. And the way they are showing up for him behind the scenes is deeply moving. The people standing beside him. Behind every public announcement like this one, there is a quiet team of loved ones who have been holding the emotional weight for a very long time. Danny has been married to Eliane Cavallero since 2009, and by every account, she has been the steady presence in his life through every high and every low of the last decade of his career. Those close to the couple say she has been by his side through every doctor visit, every hard conversation, and every quiet night when the fears started creeping in around the edges. Her name does not show up in tabloids very often, and Danny prefers it that way. Then there is his daughter Mandisa, whom he shares with his first wife, the jazz singer Asake Bomani. Mandisa was born in 1976, and she has grown up watching her father move through the world as an actor, an activist, and a father who was always fighting for something bigger than himself. Now she is watching him fight for himself, and the tenderness of that role reversal is really hard to put into words. She has stayed largely silent in public, which speaks to how much this family values dignity over spectacle in a media age that rewards the opposite. Danny also has a wider chosen family through decades of activism work. From his time with UNICEF to his involvement with the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, to his years at the Trans-Africa Forum, where he helped push global human rights forward. He has been close with world leaders and community organizers, poets and factory workers, and all of them have quietly reached out since the news broke into the open. He built a life where he was never truly alone, and that network of love is now catching him as he begins the hardest chapter of his story. What is striking is how measured the reactions from Hollywood itself have been in these first few days. There has been no rush of celebrity statements, no big red carpet tribute yet. Some fans have taken that as coldness, but people who know how tightly Danny protects his privacy say the silence is actually a form of respect. His inner circle is honoring the way he wanted this moment handled. They are letting him lead. And what he has said about his own future, once you really listen closely, might be the most powerful part of this whole story. The peace he made with losing himself. If you go back and listen to what Danny told Lester Holt on that Today Show interview, something remarkable comes into focus. He was not begging anyone for pity. He was not asking anyone to fix him. He said, in his own quiet way, that he could live with it, in a sense. Those words landed like a soft prayer from someone who has clearly done the hard inner work of accepting a future he did not choose for himself. That is not just courage. That is a whole different level of faith in what life still has waiting for him. He also made it very clear that he is not walking away from the world just yet. He has not announced any retirement. He has not signed off from acting or from public life. He is still open to work, still connected to his causes, and still deeply engaged with the people who love him. That is a message worth holding on to, because too many people hear the word Alzheimer's and immediately assume it means the end of a person's story. Danny is showing everyone watching that the story keeps going, even when the way of telling it starts to change. You can tell from every word he has spoken over the last few days that he has thought deeply about what comes next. He knows that as the disease advances, the man he sees in the mirror is going to slowly become a stranger to him. He knows that some of his memories of his childhood in San Francisco, of his early theater days, of his own daughter growing up, will fade in ways that will hurt to think about. And yet, he keeps choosing hope. He keeps choosing to speak. He keeps choosing to matter to the world around him. That is the real gift Danny Glover is giving all of us in this final act of his public life. He is showing millions of people what it looks like to face something truly terrifying without losing your grace or your voice. He is turning what could have been a shameful private secret into a shared human story that has already started to heal people who thought they were suffering alone. And in doing that, he is proving something beautiful, that even as memory fades, love and purpose are the two things that Alzheimer's can never fully take away from any of us. What did Danny's honest words about losing his memory make you feel deep inside your heart? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let us know how his courage has touched your own life today.